Hello, all. Welcome to another episode of DirectShifts Stories. And this is Raj. And today we are joined by our CEO, Vamshi, with Bryan Anderson. Bryan is the director of counseling at Brentwood School. He's the owner of Grab the Wheel Kids. He's an adjunct faculty at Texas A&M University School of Engineering. He's the key faculty at Anderson and Anderson Services. So Bryan received his master's from Columbia University School of Social Work, where he served as a social worker on adult inpatient psychiatric unit at St. Barnabas Hospital. So let's hear from him his entire story and his journey towards helping other children and other people from the social work. Over to you, Vamshi. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. Thanks again for yet another impactful episode that it is going to be. Um, Today, I'm really honored and joyful to continue to celebrate the Black History Month at DirectShifts. And we'll continue to do this by highlighting some incredible Black leaders in the healthcare space and share their stories with you all. So I'm honored to present to you our special guest today, Bryan Anderson. Like Raj said, Bryan is a very known name in the space of social work and mental health. And as a therapist, as an author, and as somebody who has impacted millions of lives there, and as somebody who has pivoted into helping the younger generation, the kids, with specific social work and mental health care, he has created impact in multiple lives. He continues to write standard operating procedures and standard methods and author easier methods to bring the right mental health care to kids. I would encourage you all to go and look at grabthewheelkids.com. There is a lot of information and a lot of description about Bryan's story there and what he has done so far and what he intends to achieve. So without much further ado, to all of our viewers out there, I would like to present Bryan Anderson. He's our special guest today, and what we'll be talking about today is his story about his journey into the mental health space and what he intends to see in the mental health space going forward and how he wishes to achieve those things in his future. So Bryan, thank you for being here. It's an honor to have you as our second special guest as we celebrate the Black History Month. Thank you for being here. And I would love for you to take the next couple of minutes to tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, your background. I may not have done full justice, so please.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much for the very generous introduction. I'm really excited to be a part of this, and excited as I continue to learn more about the work that you were doing with DirectShifts. Well, I would first say that my journey has kind of gone all over the place in a good way. I'm a very curious person who's very passionate about this field, and I like to learn. And so as a result, I have my various specialties, but I've really explored, all age groups and really all different populations within the field of mental health and education. I would start, I guess, by just saying that the journey for me from the very beginning was a very personal one. I know that you've had my father George as a guest as well, and part of my journey, of course, begins with him. Both my parents, really. My mother Nancy also is a social worker and therapist. She worked with children throughout her career, doing school psychology at an elementary school here in Los Angeles. And so between her and my father, George, I really had two of the best teachers and clinicians that I could imagine. And not just saying that because I'm biased. It's just they really both have a special gift for what they do. But to begin my career, it was really my mother that inspired me to do this work, as well as my brother. I have my older brother, Jason. Growing up, my mom was working with children with disabilities, learning disabilities, helping them, supporting them. And my older brother, growing up, himself has a learning disability. And so I watched his journey, and I watched the work that my mother was doing, and I became really passionate about helping others, particularly passionate about helping people who had various struggles, whether it be disabilities, mental health, to really unlock and reach their full potential and live a good quality of life. So from an early age, I volunteered with students with disabilities. And that was my first passion, really, was kids and younger children, early childhood specifically. I would say my career really started when I had an incredible opportunity to intern at one of the best autism clinics in the world at UCLA. It's called the UCLA Early Childhood Partial Hospitalization Program. And it is essentially a treatment program for young children with autism spectrum disorders. So my classroom was usually ages 3 to 7. I'd say mostly it was kids between the ages of 4 and 6 who had behaviors related to autism that were severe enough that it prevented them from being able to participate in a mainstream school environment. And so they were in our program, and we worked with them for somewhere between 3 and 5 months to identify their behavioral needs, their academic needs, their cognitive needs, to work with them, to develop programs to help them, that then we would train the parents how to supplement, and we would train the teachers in whatever school they were at to supplement as well. And when that work was done, we would try to place that child back in their school environment with now some more supports. So it was there that I really got my beginning as a behavioral therapist, having some incredible hands-on work, learning from some of the top researchers and experts in the field of autism. And it was really my boss there, Dr. Stephanie Freeman. She's a professor at UCLA, an autism researcher, who really just believed in me and inspired me. And when I was there, I was working with young kids who had a lot of issues with anger, really aggressive behaviors. And those were the kids that I most enjoyed working with. I really welcomed the challenge, right? And everything really changed for me when I was at the dinner table here at our house, and my dad, George, was talking about a client that he had worked with, or that he was working with. And it was a man, young adult man, who had Asperger's. And my dad was using his own wheel, contrasting wheel, which you may or may not have featured on your previous episode, but basically a intervention strategy that he uses with adults. And I started thinking as he was talking, and he started thinking and telling me that the man really succeeded, really did well with the program because it was structured, it was visual, and it was concrete. And it told him what to do. It wasn't focused on why or how. It was, here's what you can do in order to cope with your situation. And as he was talking, he kind of looked at me and said, Bryan, do you think that this could be useful for your kids at UCLA? And both of our heads just kind of exploded at the same time. I went into work the next day, told my boss about it. She grabbed me by the arm and she said, Bryan, you're doing it. And I said, what are you talking about? I was 23 years old. She goes, you're going to write a book and I'm going to help you. And we're going to do it together and we're going to publish it. And she kind of just sent me on my way, didn't really give me an option. And I was stunned thinking, well, how am I going to do this? After about 6 years of work and a full year to pilot it in the classroom, from UCLA to Columbia, finishing grad school and back, I began writing and finally finished Grab the Wheel, which actually was or is an adaptation of my father's curriculum for youth with young children. And so that was really sort of the launching point of my career and my work with children. From there, I knew that part of working with children is also working with their parents and their families. And that was the area where I felt I needed some more training, some more work, working with adults. So from there, I kind of detoured a little bit, and I began working in mental health in adult psychiatry, both in New York City as well as then mostly back in Los Angeles at UCLA in the adult psychiatric partial program and inpatient unit at UCLA. So I sort of went kind of all around the map as far as working with kids, 3 years old to 83 years old. And it gave me a nice sort of kind of balance to do this work. So that's in a nutshell sort of where my journey has gone. And of course, all the while being really interested in emotional intelligence, really interested in the work my dad was doing with doctors, being that I worked in hospitals for the vast majority of my career in healthcare. Most recently, I've pivoted to a school environment, but that really spoke to me as well. And so I began also doing some emotional intelligence coaching with executives, with doctors, and then most recently with engineering graduate students at Texas A&M. So there you go in a nutshell.
That's impressive, Bryan. First of all, let me say thank you for sharing with us those details on how things have evolved and how you're actually put structures to your thinking, got help, and really created concrete methodologies. One thing that really caught my attention was when you said it's not about how, in a broad sense, it's not about what is causing this and being very subjective about it, but it is actually about creating tactics that people can implement and really change the situation. Most of the times, behavioral health and mental health is considered very subjective, whereas even the psychiatry part of mental health or even other physical health, people are thinking it is very objective. You know what the situation is. You get some pills, you get some tests done, you're on a medication course, or you get surgeries. It's very objective. That's what most people think. Mm-hmm. But mental health, when it comes to mental health and behavioral health, there is a lot of subjectivity to it. So you clearly mentioned there doesn't need to be subjectivity to it. There can be specific tactics like the wheel strategy and the strategies that you mentioned. And one of the tactics I personally want to talk about more with you is, I know you co-designed a basketball training curriculum for the kids that were diagnosed with autism or severe autism, and help them really implement those basketball training and make sure those kids came out and actually played. I personally believe kids are here to play, period. Kids have to play. And sports and playing is the best way to cure whatever they have to be cured for. So tell us more about how that sports training actually became one of your tactics.
I'm really excited for that question. That's something I haven't gotten the chance to talk about in a long time. Basketball is a passion of mine. It's a sport I grew up playing and always have played and followed and watched to this day. Sports in general, I love, and I completely agree with how you put it. There's a quote that's children are never more serious than when they play. And I think that kind of sums it up. Children's games are not games at all. It's serious business, because that is where all of the learning and brain development is happening. Socially, emotionally, that is really the training ground. Play is really the training ground for cognitive development in young children, and really in all of us, right, as we continue to grow. So having outlets for play, having opportunities for play, really, really nurtures our brain development and enhances our social and emotional skills. It also is a great place to teach. And so that was the part that led to incorporating sports into my therapy work with young kids with autism. So I think it sort of began while we were at the clinic at UCLA, and we had recess all the time. And I sort of unofficially became kind of like the sports guy. We had a lot of we had a lot of goals. We had a large treatment plan that was given to me as a behavioral therapist that included reports and evaluations from across multiple disciplines. We had a multidisciplinary team there. So we had a occupational therapist that did an assessment, a recreational therapist that did an assessment. So there we're talking about fine motor and gross motor skills. And that was as much a part of their treatment plan for the child as was learning how to count or spell or read, or learning how to better manage anger, express emotions, and improve social skills and communication. So I took it upon myself to use sports as a way to help them practice not only their gross and fine motor goals, running, jumping, skipping, moving around, catching a ball, throwing a ball, but also with the social skills part. Because if you can motivate someone or find something that engages them, at that point, that's really the hard part. Once you have someone's attention, teaching is much easier and really just becomes about adjusting accordingly. But getting their attention is really the important part. If you have someone's attention, you can figure out how to teach them, right? So sports was really the way in for me to engage a lot of these kids, because it put them in a situation where they were focusing on one thing, which was the game or the task at hand. And when I had them kind of captive in that space, I could then add in all kinds of little wrinkles that, unbeknownst to them, were helping them practice social and emotional skills too. If I'm going to pass the ball to you and throw it to you, I want to make sure you're looking at me and that you're ready for the pass. So I got to check out your body language. I got to see if your gaze is pointed at me. I got to look at your hands to see if they're up, ready to catch the ball. And if they are, right, I'm going to act accordingly. I'm going to pass you the ball. If they're not, maybe I need to wait. Maybe I need to do something different. Maybe I need to use a social skill and say, hey, Brian, catch, right, before I throw the ball. So the patience, the waiting, the awareness of yourself and someone else, all that happens in just passing the ball to another person. And so that's an example right there of one very small thing, it's part of the game, that has so much as far as practicing a skill for a young child, especially a young child with autism that's working on every single bit of that equation, right? Every single bit of that process of holding a ball, looking at somebody, and passing it to them. So that's in a nutshell kind of the technical part of why it was useful. And then it was fun. It gave the kids an opportunity to do something together. It's fun and social activity. It's exercise. And so, problem solving, sharing, coping with emotions, all of that is a part of any type of sport, especially a team sport. So
absolutely.
In a nutshell, that's, kind of what we did with the basketball curriculum.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I loved how you put it, Brian, which is, really take something that is fun without losing the fun, attach the actual teaching and therapy to it, convert it into a tactic that many people could even deploy at homes. You don't really have to be in a training center or a healthcare center. You can actually deploy this. The way you explained it on how a basketball game could be converted into, without losing the fun, a social, emotional, and physical skill that they're practicing. And that could be a tactic that can be deployed at home. Wonderful. That really shows how passionate you are about creating more tactics to help the kids versus being on the periphery. Thank you for sharing that story. Very, very impressive. I'm assuming you're in LA. You're probably a Lakers fan.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been a Lakers fan and always commemorate the great Kobe for sure. I've been a bigger Lakers fan now that they brought LeBron in. So, yeah. Absolutely, it's wonderful, and congratulations. Really,
very proud. You're very
Yeah,
proud.
absolutely. Great. So, one additional point there, Bryan, you also mentioned as a part of your therapy or social work activities, you have a huge focus on training the parents as well.
Mhm.
So, um, what are some of the aspects that, especially when it comes to mental health with kids, it's not the kid alone that is actually going through it. It is the whole ecosystem that the kid is a part of that potentially has to go through with it. And parents are a big portion of it. So, what is some of the specific aspect of the training that you deliver to the parents, and how should parents actually take it and potentially implement it on an ongoing basis so that the mental health care for kids is much more accessible, is much more uh, less scary than something that has stigma attached with it? What is the role of the parents, and what kinds of trainings do you actually give to parents?
Yeah, great question. I think of an analogy that we often would give to parents as their child would begin the program, and it's true of really any type of treatment. We would say, politely but firmly, this is not a car wash, right? You can't just sort of drop your kid off and they go through and they do the program and then the job is done. Everything is solved and washed away. As far as predicting the sort of success or gains or growth of the child in any type of program, it's always going to be correlated with the involvement of the parent or parents or guardians. And so the more involved you can be in, any of the treatment or coaching that your child is receiving, the better the outcome's likely to be. So that includes, making sure, of course, that they have access to it, that they can get to their appointments, but also being involved, being curious, whether it's with a therapist or doctor, to know and understand, what is the treatment, what kind of work is being done, to observe. If you have the ability to, in whatever setting. And then, of course, when you get home, that's where the work begins. And so we'd always remind people, I may spend a couple hours a day, with your child, but you're with them around the clock. And so the impact of the parents always is going to have the biggest result. As far as sort of general advice or thoughts and things related to training the parents, really, if I could sort of sum it up in one word, the word would be modeling, right? So modeling, or sometimes people call it mirroring. We all learn from what we see around us, and a child learns from what they see when they look at their caregivers. So the way that a child from birth begins to understand his or her own emotions is actually by looking at their caregiver and watching the reactions of their caregiver, right? Their caregiver will look at them and start to express their own emotions in their face and their tone of voice. The child will begin to detect that and recognize that from mom or from dad. And then when the child is upset, maybe starts crying, before that child has language, the way that they learn what an emotion is by the caregiver naming that emotion. So if the child is crying and the mother says, or the father says, "What's wrong? Are you sad? Oh, it looks like you're sad." The child is now hearing the word sad and matching that word with their own internal experience. That's how we learn what emotions are. The more back and forth that you have between caregiver and child in that sort of a way, language around emotions, responding to emotions, then the more intelligence you are building within that child's brain. Again, from a very early age, I'm talking 1 and 2 years old, children start to are able to take this feedback in, even before they're able to use language. So the young children I spend time on or talk about in such detail because it really is amazing to watch. That stage of development, so much for people who have young children or spend time around them. So much is happening in just the course of a day that you just wouldn't believe it. If you think about the amount of social and emotional and brain development happening in early childhood, it's just remarkable. And a lot can be learned from young children that still applies into adulthood and still really teaches us a lot about human beings and emotions, how we cope, how we learn, and sort of what we need. And so, the biggest need for, a young child is that type of modeling from the parents, and that includes behaviorally. So, monkey see, monkey do, right? If you want your child to respond to stress in a certain way, then you yourself are going to need to respond to stress in that same way. Your child is going to take after you, watch and observe you, and learn from how you react to things. So modeling, and that means that it starts within ourselves. So for parents to better care for their children, parents have to first care for themselves. So, there's plenty of sayings about it. You can't pour from an empty cup, right? We want to do so much for others that often we forget to take care of ourselves. But I would say to parents to be gentle and kind to yourself. Parenting is hard. It doesn't come with a book. You're not bad for having difficulties, or your child having difficulties. It's not a reflection on you. Instead, to look at yourself as someone who is doing something challenging, who has a full life with its own stresses and difficulties, and you really need to take the time to take care of yourself if you're going to be able to take care of somebody else. So it starts really with the parent. And if you're able to take care of yourself, you're able to pay attention and be aware of your own temperament. So how you are feeling emotionally is going to be felt by everybody around you, right? Just the nonverbal presence that we have in a room can be detected, by other people. So with your child or at home, if you are stressed, if you are feeling anxious, your child will be able to sense or pick up on that. Does that mean you're not allowed to be anxious? No. Does that mean you're not allowed to be stressed? No. It just means that when you are stressed, how you handle it, how you manage your own stress, that is going to be a way of teaching your child how they can manage their own anxiety and their own stress. So there's just tons to think about and say on this topic. But modeling, if you want your child to feel calm in the face of something that's very scary, for example, this pandemic or social unrest in our country or in our world, if the parent can model, this is difficult and we're going to figure it out, or this is really difficult, this is really painful, and we're going to find a way through it, right? That's modeling calmness, that's modeling problem solving, that's modeling tolerating stress in a healthy way. It's modeling optimism, right? So that type of modeling is I would say, the most powerful way to guide your child. And that way is free, and it starts with you. It's all in your control, right? If you are calm, if you lower your voice, if you slow yourself down, whoever you're talking to, child or adult, is likely to do the same and sort of match your tone and your temperament.
Yep. Sorry, I may have had a little bit of a technical snag there, but I'm back. That's a great point, Bryan. You mentioned about modeling and making sure you're actually behaving the way you want your child to behave. As a parent, you're modeling all those behaviors and you're constantly assessing those. In fact, one of my good friends, who, by the way, is great with kids, who always used to tell me, continues to tell me, that it's not just about what you say, it's how you say that matters in a greater way sometimes. So, like you said, this does not come with a playbook. This does not come with, for parents out there, in order to ensure the younger generation, the kids' mental health is being taken care of, their emotional awareness is being mentored, grown right from the early stages. It really doesn't come with a tactical playbook. Do this, check on this, assess this. At the end of the day, do this, or at the end of the week, do this. It really isn't a playbook, like you said. So, what, in your opinion, should be good resources? I would be very happy to understand the resources that you have authored as well. But how do parents and adults really take some of the tactics and implement them in their daily lives or weekly lives? And how do they assess if there are improvements that are happening because of how they are modeling those behaviors? What should they be doing in order to be more aware of uh, how they're doing it and the kind of improvement that they're actually seeing in their kids?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. I'll bring it back to the example, sort of about basketball and about using basketball as teaching in a way. It all starts with engagement and building rapport. When in whatever field that you're working in, whether it's business or healthcare, thinking about patient care and outcomes, or thinking about parenting a young child, or being a classroom teacher, it's all about engagement and rapport. If you have someone engaged and you have a good relationship with them, anything is possible. If you don't have that, it's going to be really difficult for you to make as big of an impact as you could. So the prerequisite to everything is building rapport and being engaged. So we might as well start there with that basic foundation, right? We can't skip that step. A lot of well-intentioned, well-meaning parents might be willing to show up for the solution, but they've skipped over the foundation. And they may wonder, why is my child not talking to me? Why is my child not listening to me? I don't understand what's going on. Whenever you're at a loss, it's good to return to that basic building block of building rapport, of engaging, right? That's really the foundation that is going to result in your tactics being successful, right?
Yep.
So,
Well said.
Yeah.
No, absolutely well said. I think those complete awareness of those tactics and making sure that is resulting in the success that you actually want to see is such an important point. So tell us more about the wheel strategy. You mentioned the wheel strategy was actually used on adult patients. You modified it to really make it a custom solution to kids. What exactly is that wheel strategy, and how actually did you modify it? If you're not sharing the secret sauce, but if you're able to share the majority of it, we would love to hear what the strategy is.
Yeah, I will share the secret sauce. Absolutely. So in order for the wheel tactic, to really be effective, we have to understand, what motivates us as human beings, or for someone with their child, what motivates your child? What is your child like? What do they enjoy? What do they care about? What makes them happy? What makes them laugh, right? And on the other side, what upsets them? What are they struggling with? What do they find difficult? What do they find scary, right? Those are really the things, those motivators that we have to tap into in order to develop change. So I'm going to need to reward or praise a child in a way that's motivating to them. So that is something you need to know if you're going to use the wheel, because it's a part of the lesson. It's a part of the intervention. So I can show you exactly sort of what the wheel is and where it came from, and I'll show you by holding up just a page from my book here. What you see here on the left-hand side, the Anderson and Anderson wheel, is the wheel that my father created. This is what we use with adults to help develop skills for managing stress and interactions with other people. And so I obviously grew up learning this from my father and began to work with clients and using it myself across different settings. So these are the skills on this wheel assertiveness, active listening, focusing, seeking compromise, rephrasing, honest feedback, expressing feelings, and stating needs. These here are the skills that we want people to use when they have a conflict, when they have a problem, right? Use one of those skills, and it's going to be more likely to lead to a positive outcome for you and the other person. What I did is I took this wheel here and I turned it in, and I said to myself, how would I express this to a 5-year-old? How would I teach a 5-year-old, right? How would I teach a 5-year-old how to use these skills? I have to adjust the language and I have to make it accessible. So we took assertiveness, and stating needs, and we turned that into strong words, right? We took active listening and focusing, and we turned that into listening. We took expressing feelings and honest feedback, and we turned that into say how I feel. And we took seeking compromise and rephrasing, and we turned that into try something different. And so that is the secret sauce. The secret sauce is these are the skills that we have found are important for adults to use to better manage relationships, resolve conflicts. And so these are the same skills that young children need to learn. We just can't use the big fancy words. So we have to have something that's quick and easy and to the point. And that's what we have with Grab the Wheel and what is called the Good Choice Wheel. So the language is key. Language is everything because the language is how we learn. So the language for this is with a young child, when you have a problem, stay cool, which means when your brain is hijacked, you first have to calm down before you can do anything else. So you want to teach your child how to calm down. That might mean taking a break. That might mean sitting alone for a moment. That might mean taking a step outside. Might be picking up a basketball and shooting until you feel a little bit better, right? It might mean just taking a couple breaths if you only have a moment. But when you have a problem, stay cool and make a good choice. Make a good choice means select one of these coping strategies. If you're able to make a good choice, that is, use one of these, it's more likely to lead to a good outcome for you and the other person. It's basically the same language that we use with adults, but just modified for use with a young child. So you're going to use what motivates them. If they are struggling with their friend and they want to have a good relationship with this friend, you tell them, if you do these things, you're going to have a better relationship with that friend. If they're getting in trouble in school all the time and they're missing recess and they're sick of it, they just want to play, you tell them, you make choices on this wheel here, you're more likely to have a good time at school, a good time at recess, and you're not going to be in trouble as much. So tapping into what motivates the child and then helping them see it's worth it for you if you can learn how to do one of these things. It also shows them that if you act in this way with us, your parents, you're going to be more likely to get good things. You're going to be more likely to get your way, get that thing that you want, that present that you asked for, if you're using skills that are from this wheel. And so that, in a nutshell, is the basics of it.
Oh, great point. I love how you turned the tactics and strategies that were applicable to adults in the language that adults would understand into a playful, fun-filled language and words and a wheel that kids would actually appreciate. I love how you did it, especially for kids, for young children who may be going through problems. And then you put the complication of a therapy on top of it, it could easily become an additional problem for them. But if you convert that into a playful mechanism like what you just showed, oh my God, it's so much fun to actually teach them all these things. Is this, have you seen this really leading to, I'm sure you have, I just want to know, this leading to parents now having lesser stigma about opening up with respect to kids' mental health, or potentially parents now adopting these solutions much more, or the society in general adopting these much more, plus the schools in general adopting these kinds of techniques much more when you have converted them into real playful solutions for the kids. Is that happening, or is that your hope? Is that what you're working towards?
It's happening, and as always, we can always be doing better. And so it is happening for sure. And there's a lot of great work that's being done. There's been a huge shift in terms of the way that we look at behavior in children, a shift in a positive way, a shift that also recognizes the role of trauma in childhood behavior, which prior to very recently was largely overlooked. And trauma can come in all shapes, forms, and sizes, not just the sort of obvious or apparent ways. And so, there's been I think a larger investment in how we work it with and support children. I can say, as far as the results that I've seen, and as far as stigma, approaching it in this playful way definitely helps a lot, including with the child themselves. That so much stigma is around that the child themselves feels it. They feel like, well, I don't want to have something be wrong with me, or I don't want to feel like I'm crazy, or I don't want to feel like a problem, right? So going to therapy or the idea of working with someone can feel to the child like a punishment. And sometimes parents can actually, unfortunately, make it sound that way. You've been bad, so you have to go see Bryan. It shouldn't be put that way ever, unless you want your child to associate learning with punishment. And that's not what you want. You want them to see this for what it is, which is, this is a gift. This is an opportunity for you to grow. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. So the positivity, I think, really helps with the stigma. Making it playful really helps with the stigma. It makes it approachable. Same is true for adults. And in a way to sort of frame it or brand that, that is why the work that my dad has done and our work with Anderson and Anderson, emotional intelligence has been the answer or the secret. Because emotional intelligence is not something that comes with stigma. It's something that has to do with positive psychology, with growth mindset, and you don't have to be sick to get better. We can start from where you're at and grow, right? It's not a bad thing to come to get help. So emotional intelligence sees it as coaching and sees it as skills. It sees it as behaviors. And so that's the way that we're framing it, right? These are skills that you can develop and grow from when you're a child all the way into adulthood, right? Always room to grow, grow, grow. And so by framing it that way, you get around a lot of the stigma that has to do with psychotherapy, that has to do with mental health. That's unfortunate, but it's there. We, by training, are able to provide psychotherapy and treat mental health. We also are trained in emotional intelligence. And so we really use that combination to our advantage. That's the one secret, I would say, of all.
Absolutely. You know, it should be recognized as a skill and a skills training versus trying to adopt it. Is absolutely well said. For all of our viewers out there, I just want to remind Bryan's dad is George Anderson, who was one of the first leaders on our podcast platform. Ever since, he has become a great friend of the company. He loves what we do at DirectShifts in terms of connecting clinicians directly to the employers, solve the whole healthcare access to providers problem, healthcare staffing and recruitment problems. In fact, we would love to announce that we may be working together more in terms of making emotional intelligence trainings more available to the clinician network that we have. We'll be doing some work together, and we're definitely excited for that work, Bryan. And thanks to you and your dad for putting that trust in us and continuing to work and be a great partner with us. Absolutely. And to your point, identifying this more as a skills training versus potentially solving a problem when the problem happens, not even branding mental health issues as problems, but recognizing them as solvable challenges. It's all in how you put it. Having said that, is there enough work that is being done from a policy perspective in the mental health space, let alone not just the adult space, but now in the kids space, where we are recognizing bigger need for mental health or skills training with respect to emotional intelligence? Are you seeing more and more favorable policies that are encouraging this kind of work that are coming up? For example, last time we spoke a lot about with George about how potential reimbursement policies have to change if people have to adopt and get more mental health care, how that has to be, a whole different scenario where people are more motivated to go seek mental health care. In fact, one of the other leaders that we had on our platform mentioned that in one of the foreign countries, I believe it's Argentina, most people have their therapist. In fact, they brag about, my therapist is better than your therapist, kind of a thing. So how can we get to a situation where therapy becomes such a natural part of life, so that overall mental health, which has a huge bearing on physical health as well, is improved? So are you seeing such improvements in policies, in protocols that will favor more motivation of adoption? Or if you do still see some deficiencies there, what would your wish list be in terms of, if this were there, you could do more work in this space?
Yeah, great question. I'm laughing because it's funny that you mentioned Argentina and comparing therapists in the beginning, because you're right. It definitely is Argentina. I actually have spent some time in Argentina, and I have some friends down there who are therapists or who work in that space. And they actually have the most psychologists per capita in Argentina than any other country. But aside from that, it's a good example of removing the stigma and people talking about, my therapist, just casually to each other, in the street. And you may have that sometimes in bigger cities, LA, New York, a little bit more than other places, but even still, it still is a major stigma. So I think that the policy actually goes hand in hand with the stigma, because if we treat mental health like a crime and we treat those with mental health challenges like criminals, then it really furthers that message, right? That something is wrong with you if you are struggling with mental health, that you're a problem, that you're dangerous, and things of this nature that are false, irresponsible, and so damaging ultimately to everybody, to all of us, to all of the parents. This is not helping anybody. So with regards to policy, something devastating, heartbreaking to me happened just within this last week. That's a good example of where we are and where we need to get to. And that is in Rochester, New York, a 9-year-old Black girl was arrested and forcibly detained and then pepper sprayed by a police officer. 9-year-old girl. And it doesn't matter what it was related to, truly, but it was related to her not complying with some demand or ask that the officer had made. And the officer actually said to the child during this altercation, "You're really behaving like a child," which to me, I think says it all. That this little Black girl was not allowed to behave like a child. She is a child. And it's time that we, honor children with respecting where they're at. So responding punitively in the education system is a good place to start. We have schools across this country that have police officers embedded within the school. This is a big topic with a lot of different complicated angles, but I'll stick to just this one part. Schools that have police officers in them are more likely to have children arrested, which makes logical sense. But it doesn't necessarily make the school safer. But it does make sure that more children will be arrested. When more children are arrested, more children then become involved in the criminal justice system. When they become involved in the criminal justice system, they're more likely to face abuses and other mental health, other things that are detrimental to their mental health. So that 9-year-old girl who was just being a 9-year-old girl now has been traumatized by our educational system. And that trauma produces a lot of things that are damaging to mental health. And it can also produce issues with anger, issues with behavior, and issues with reacting impulsively, which sometimes can look like aggression or violence. And so this is where we have to make a change, because there are too many young children who are being treated as criminals for simply being children that are there to grow and learn, including socially and emotionally. So whether it's young children or even adults, I believe that police officers should not be responding to calls of somebody who's in mental health distress. Someone like me should be responding to the call of someone in mental health distress. A therapist, a social worker, someone who's trained in that should be the one responding to a mental health emergency. Too often when the police are involved in responding to a mental health emergency, it leads to violence and death. And that's something that's also happening every week, and also was in the news recently of an individual who was killed while actually in a mental health crisis and in need of support. And so that's a place to shift our policy, is not treating mental health like a crime, not treating addiction like a crime, and instead treating it as a public health issue and responding to it with care, not with force or punishment.
That's a great point. I think not treating it as a punishment, not treating it as a problem, but really treating it as a public health issue. I think we have to underscore that statement right there. With that said, Bryan, one of the physicians that was on our podcast, I think this week, Dr. Ramso, it's a great Black physician leader, great innovator, did give us statistics about how disproportionately, how the statistics shows the disproportionate nature of Black clinicians amongst the whole population of clinicians. And it definitely creates access issues, because people, even though you say you have created access and resources for them, if they're not able to get the resources and care from people that they can really associate with, they're potentially not going to get that care. So it is important that there is diversity in the workforce, as there is huge diversity in the population seeking for that healthcare as well. So, and we are celebrating Black History, so it just motivates me to ask the question, are there enough resources that are encouraging more and more young Black adults to seek social work, mental health as a profession? Are you seeing that more and more happening? Is that becoming a more and more sought after, attractive profession with all the changes and recognition of mental health that's going on? If yes, what else should be happening there? How do you want to see that momentum really grow? If no, what is your message? We have a large network of clinicians out there that are therapists, physicians, nurses, nurse practitioners that may have far-reaching wide effects as well. What is your message to the younger generation out there in order to make sure that they're picking up social work, therapy, counseling as a profession, in order to make sure that access issues are solved as well?
Great question. It's a huge problem. The underrepresentation, the extremely limited amount of Black clinicians is huge. And so being just a Black male in this field, I am a rare, I'm rare. There's not nearly enough of us around. So why is that? What can be done about it? I think it all starts with access and opportunity, just like anything else. Growing up, if you are unable to see people who look like you doing a certain profession, you're less and less likely to see yourself being a part of that profession. I was able to see my parents, doing this profession, and that quickly made me, from an early age, feel like that this was something that I could do too. But that's not the case for many Black young people out there. I think stigma is a part of it, but more than anything, I still think it's opportunity and access. And so, what does that mean? It means, just like we need to expose, Black children, Black boys, girls, and boys to, technology or learning coding. or other, fields where, we are underrepresented, this field, is the same. We need to just provide more learning opportunities to learn about psychology, to learn about mental health, to learn about social work, to learn about trauma. And I think again, in order to learn, you first have to be safe. You have to be well taken care of, and so we have to create safer environments. We have to create environments that are not, criminalizing young Black children. Because if they're busy being treated like the 9-year-old girl in Rochester, they're not going to be able to learn about mental health and all the great career opportunities that they could be a part of. So again, it starts with how we are caring for these communities, what opportunities are being afforded to them, and how we as clinicians who are doing this can take care of one another and try to reach out to these communities to create some of these learning opportunities.
Absolutely. I think well said. Just one final question with regard to that, Bryan, and I would be more keen to know how you have, adapted to this changing environment. As we all know, the last 12 months has been challenging in terms of having more person-to-person interactions or physical interactions, etc. A lot of operations have gone digital, virtual, we can call it whatever, but limited physical interactions, especially in the mental health space, where people tend to think it is really important to have more physical interactions, etc. And with that not being possible over the last 12 months, but still, providing the care that you actually want to provide to the populations that you serve, how have you personally adapted to the digital virtual environment, and how would you recommend others do the same? As such, there is limited access. If that access also is constrained by events like pandemic, then it further reduces. Having said that, technology could help. So there is a lot of digital means through which patients could be engaged now. Potential populations that we care for could be engaged in a better way sometimes. So how have you personally adapted to this changing environment, more infusion of technology, and do you recommend people do more of that in this space of especially teaching emotional and mental health skills to kids? Is technology still playing a favorable role?
Mm-hmm. Really tough question, really important question. There's pros and cons to everything, and there's two sides to every coin, and that's the way that I see this current situation. There are some things that are silver linings to this. There's some things about technology that I think are making some of my students at my school more comfortable in accessing maybe mental health for the first time. It may be less intimidating to some people than making an appointment and walking into somebody's office in person. So, there are some who this may be benefiting, and we have to, include that narrative in there when we think about this. That said, there also are a lot of losses. So for me personally, getting into sort of this business was about being in the room with that person and almost feeling their heartbeat, being able to feel their presence, to get a sense of where they're at, how they're doing, and getting to know them. And so being in a room, seeing someone's body language is, the most important diagnostic tool that I have. And so being on a screen, limits that a lot, and it makes you have to approach it in a different way. And I think it makes it harder. It might make it take a little bit longer, I think, to engage and connect. So I've faced that challenge personally and miss having people in person for that reason. At the same time, I think, we all have to adapt. We have to realize that, this parts of this are here to stay. Parts of this could be lessons to learn. I think one advantage or one way to sort of pivot is looking into making things more on demand. So, we have long had, streaming services, Netflix, Hulu. We have had, online classes and things of that nature. But specifically around things like mental health or self-care, we've had less as far as that type of education that's on demand. So, access to a therapist does not only have to last for 1 hour in a discrete session. I think that there's more and more that we could be uploading that has good information in it that's engaging to different audiences and making that accessible to people. So that's a place to start that could kind of leverage this. But there's definitely a lot of damage that's done just from not having the in-person human contact. Yeah. And so mental health wise, social, emotional development wise, we're seeing that with kids. And I expect there to be a long-term impact that's going to be really noticeable in young children who have grown up during this period of time and missed out on a full year of school and socializing. We're going to see kids with struggles with behavior. We're going to see kids in school that may not be as prepared socially and emotionally, maturity-wise, as before, simply because they really missed out on a lot during this year of development. On the other hand, we also have an opportunity to be at home with our families, and that's been a huge positive for so many people that has offset, a lot of the risks or the damage. So it's, it's got pros and cons to it, and I think it's about trying to leverage those things that are good about it to take care of the things that have been damaging.
Absolutely, well said, Bryan. And with the hope that the pandemic's constraints and challenges will be behind us pretty soon, and with the happiness that we have all been able to adopt and adapt to the newer technologies and still trying to keep ourselves sane and continue the momentum forward. Now, I would definitely encourage all of our audience to go check out grabthewheelkids.com. Bryan has been a great guest for us today, and we would hope to continue our relationship with Bryan. I thoroughly enjoyed this past 1 hour. And again, I would strongly encourage all of our audience to go check out grabthewheelkids.com, and please let us know if you have questions. Bryan, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. It has been an absolute pleasure discussing all these aspects with you and learning from you, and hopefully sharing this information with thousands out there that potentially could be watching this now or later on. So thank you again for being a great leader in the field that you are in. And thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to collaborate more and talk more, and I'm happy to come back and do this anytime.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care.
Raj.
Thank you. Thank you, Bryan Anderson, for last 60 minutes of golden time. In fact, I love the analogy which you used. Parenting is not like car wash. That's like, we expect instant results. Parents have huge expectations because 24/7 we are with the kids for past 10 months. It's driving nuts. And I know lots of parents out there who are on the news, who are on BBC, CNN, who had left their jobs just for homeschooling their own children. Could you give us few examples before we end this session? What are the strong words which needs to be used in the wheel, which you mentioned? Because for us, strong words is always threatening the child, cursing the child, saying, I'm scaring the child to do something. But what strong words would you recommend?
Yeah, so the strong words is the skill related to assertiveness. And assertiveness is not the same as aggressiveness. Assertiveness is being confident, being direct in asking for what you want or need, but not doing it in a way that's intimidating the other person, insulting the other person, or harming the other person. So you certainly want to be able to ask your child to do something. You certainly want to set limits and boundaries on what is allowed and what is not. But are you doing it in a way that's healthy? If you're doing it in a way that's healthy and you're asking your child in a way that's healthy to do this or that, that's that type of modeling. So for adults, we call it assertiveness. For the child, we call it strong words. So for the child, you want to ask your child, if you want something, rather than yelling and screaming at me, you need to use your strong words and ask me nicely. That means ask confidently, ask with eye contact, right? If you ask with a smile on your face, even better. If you're not happy and you're angry, that's fine too. You can be upset in your voice and in your face, but don't insult, right, hit, or harm another person. You can say, I'm mad at you, and here's what I need from you. That's okay. That's allowed. That's a good thing, right? But to insult, intimidate, or try to manipulate, that's not good. So as far as for parents to children, you don't want to use those type of desperate tactics, because your child is going to then see that that's the only way to get things done. And that's not what we actually want. So rather than the threat, instead search for the opportunity. Search high and low, near and far for what motivates your child, and figure out as many ways to set those things up as possible rewards. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the biggest reward for your child is you, your own personal time and presence in their life. And when I say presence in their life, that means no phone, no TV, no looking at your watch. It means even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes, if that 5 or 10 minutes is just you and the child, that's worth more than gold. So to use that as a reinforcer, and instead of the threat, it's, I need you to do this. And then it's also, they say, catch them when they're being good, meaning reward your child when they do something well. You can also catch them for no reason at all, and let them know that your love is unconditional, that you're going to find opportunities to do things that they like. And if they see that good things can be coming to them periodically when they least expect it, that is a big time reinforcement schedule, right? It's like people play the slot machine. You never know when you're going to win, and then they play forever. Same thing with the child. You want the child to know that sometimes when you do good things, you might get something really cool. And sometimes just when you're hanging out doing nothing, you might get something really special as well. It's going to motivate them to, continue to behave in a sense.
Yeah. Thank you, Bryan Anderson, for the great insights. Again, for all the viewers, if you're watching the replay, please do like, comment, and share the content which you had watched, and listen to this on Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts also. Thank you, Vamshi. Pandemic parenting is a universal deep ocean. This training, or probably this workshop or this session, can also go for a full day training. But log on to grabthewheels.com, as Vamshi said. And we'll see you in the next episode of DirectShifts Stories. Until then, this is Raj. I'll see you soon. Thank you all. Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, Vamshi.
Thank you all.